She was a mother, 8-year-old triplets, and she was face down on the couch, strangled to death.
It's likely that whoever killed her was somebody who knew her and was conversing with her, and then would have flown into a rage and attacked her.
A cold-hearted killing.
The scarf could have been used to strangle Dana to death.
This case, it was a genuine whodunit.
A twisted mystery with multiple suspects.
The police looked at the estranged husband, they'd looked at the boyfriend, they'd looked at the stalker. Somebody did this, and they just had to figure out who that was.
The truth will be revealed.
I may describe this person best as somebody who's a fledgling psychopath.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. At the foot of Mount Rainier in Washington lies Puyallup, a quaint, peaceful town with nature trails and tree-lined streets.
Puyallup is a smaller town. It's an old town. It has some nice scenery. You move here for the schools and the parks and for your kids. Puyallup is a safe town. It's going to have a lower crime rate. It's not the kind of place where you expect to see a lot of violent crime.
But in August 2001, on a day like any other, police get a worrying call about one of the town's newest residents.
Dana Laskowski worked as a nanny for 2 doctors, and she was scheduled to arrive at 7:30 in the morning at work, and she didn't show up. This was very unusual for her. She was very reliable, so her employers called us, and we responded out to her house to check her welfare.
About 11 in the morning, the police arrive at Dana's residence to just make sure that she's okay. Knock on the door, and there's no answer. They did a perimeter check, and they looked in the windows and tried to see if they could see anything, and they didn't notice anything. But they did find that the back door was open, and so they went ahead and entered the house.
Our officers came in calling Dana's name and then found her on the couch in the living room. She was underneath blankets. She was in a position where her head was resting on her arm, and then her other arm, we found it behind her back. She was deceased.
Police will always do at least a cursory examination of the body to see where the injuries might be and to look for any kind of things like stab wounds or gunshot wounds. There were nothing like that, but they did notice injuries to her throat, ligature marks. And there was a scarf close by, which indicated that she'd been strangled. At this point, it's a homicide investigation.
But who would want to kill 36-year-old Dana Laskowski?
Dana was a mother with 8-year-old triplets, and she had a niece, Amanda, that she felt like a mother to, and said, you can come and go here however you please, and so can your friends, and if you need anything from me, I'll be there.
When she'd walk into a room, she would get to know everybody in the room. Everybody would like her. She's very outgoing, very personable.
She was always somebody that had a kind word or a kind deed for everybody.
Tasked with investigating Dana's murder are veteran detective Scott Bramhall and prosecuting attorney Stephen Penner.
There are certainly crime scenes, homicide scenes, where there's blood spatter, a victim on the ground, visible injuries, maybe a disruption all around the room. That wasn't the case here. There wasn't any blood, no weapons. There wasn't anything really broken. She was face down on the couch.
When police turn Dana over, they find bruising on her neck and dried blood around her nose and ears.
The medical examiner ruled that the cricoid cartilage of her throat was fractured, so it's a crushing injury to the throat.
Dana died from being strangled to death, probably with her own scarf. It's possible to strangle somebody with your hands, but like any tool, a ligature makes it easier. If you're behind them with a ligature, It can be very difficult to get the ligature off the throat. And even if you can dig your fingers in between the ligature and your throat, it won't stop the compression of the airway. In this particular case, it appeared that the scarf that could have been used to strangle Dana to death. So the police searched for any kind of trace evidence, DNA, bodily fluids, something that they could use to try to identify the killer. They looked for everything they could and they didn't find anything. We kept going back to Dana's body, where it was found and what position it was in. Her arm up behind her back, face down on the couch, strangled to death. It suggested that there was a struggle. Whoever did this had enough strength to overpower someone who's literally fighting for their life.
The crime indicated the offender was strong, somebody with upper body strength. So we were assuming the offender would be a male.
To find Dana's killer, Detective Bramhall must reconstruct the final 24 hours of her life, starting with the crime scene.
There were abrasions to Dana Laskowski's knees and elbows, and they would be an indication that Dana Laskowski was not killed on the couch, that it was likely that there was a possible struggle on the floor. We were able to process the carpet with luminol. What we did was we marked on the rug the location of the luminol illuminations, and that formed a pattern. The pattern would be an indication that Dana was killed on the floor. The person that killed her would have then picked her up and placed her on the couch and then covered her up.
Investigators believe the killer was trying to make the body more comfortable after death, an example of undoing behavior.
Undoing is a type of psychological defense mechanism. We all have such mechanisms. In this case, the fact that she was covered with a blanket may indicate that somebody had engaged in undoing behavior to cancel out or counteract the murder. You could read some remorse or guilt into undoing behavior. It implies that there's some sort of relationship here between the killer and the victim.
That would indicate that the killer was someone who had affection for Dana. This isn't a random burglar who broke in and accidentally found her. This is somebody maybe who knew her. And that's important as you develop suspects.
Then, police received significant information about Dana's murder.
The medical examiner was able to approximate that Dana had been there for a few hours before the police arrived, and most likely had died in the early hours of that morning.
We knocked on the neighbors' doors, and one said that they reported hearing a woman screaming during the night. They estimated that time at about 1 a.m., so that gave us a time frame.
We knew by 7:30 that morning, Dana probably was dead because she didn't show up for her job.
Having established Dana was killed between the hours of 1 and 7:30 a.m., police start looking into Dana's background for clues about her murder.
Dana was a mother. She had 3 young children, 8-year-old triplets, living with her. But at the time that Dana was murdered, they were with Steve, her husband. She had been recently separated. And police were able to establish that she had started dating. What that does is that just increases the universe of people who might be suspects. The people that Dana would let into her house late at night that she would think that she was safe with, when it turned out that she wasn't.
Detectives asked Dana's employers if Dana had concerns about any of the men she'd been dating.
The people that she worked for as a nanny told the police that Dana had mentioned a man, Adam, who had termed as kind of a stalker.
Dana had just moved into her house, and Adam ran a bucket truck for a cable company. And Adam had come to install some cable.
When the job was done, Adam asked Dana out on a date. She wasn't interested, but that didn't stop him from pursuing her.
Adam was a guy who wouldn't take no for an answer and wouldn't leave her alone. His behavior escalated. Dana reported getting notes on her door, flowers, gifts. And he was surveilling her while she was at home. And then calls and texts that just wouldn't stop. By all indications, this was obsessive, controlling, angry behavior, which would make it more credible that this person might be able to get to the mental state, the emotional state, to kill somebody.
Then, what police learn next increases their interest in Adam as a suspect even further.
Dana's employers told us that Dana had said that if anything happened to her, it would be this cable guy. We find that significant, and we take that very seriously.
If she was scared enough to tell people that he might do something to me, something violent, and then something did happen to her, that, of course, raised concerns by the police.
At that point, Adam becomes the prime suspect.
Police are closing in on a suspect, a cable installer named Adam, who had been stalking Dana Laskowski in the weeks leading up to her murder.
Adam seemed to have a motive, seemed to have a behavior that would suggest that he was likely the killer.
We were focused on Adam as a prime suspect. And we got search warrants on his vehicle, bucket truck, on his locker at work, and we took him into custody. He was belligerent. He was very uncooperative and insisted he wasn't the one that killed her.
Detectives then press Adam about where he was the night Dana was killed.
On the night of the murder, he said he was at home hanging out with his friends.
Searches through Adam's phone records show he was at home that night.
Based on his alibi as he gave it and the way it checked out, he was moved down on the list of suspects for our investigation.
The police really thought Adam was the one who had killed Dana because of the stalking behavior. But now they have to turn their attention and resources to other suspects.
Investigators shift their focus to a small clue found at the crime scene.
Dana Laskowski had a phone number written on her hand in ink, and some of that was faded. But we looked at that phone number and looked at identifying whose phone number it was.
When police check the phone number, they discover it belongs to a 35-year-old man named Julian.
The phone number linked to Julian opens up a realm of possibilities as to his potential motive. This speaks to a certain degree of intimacy. The fact that it's taken down in this manner suggests that that number was important to her.
Detectives track down Julian and bring him in for questioning. They ask why his phone number would be on Dana's hand.
He was not really answering. I thought that was a little odd. So we kind of zeroed in on his relationship with Dana.
Julian tells investigators Dana was dating his best friend, Matt, but Julian seems nervous.
When we confronted Julian and asked him if he also had a relationship with Dana, he acknowledged that. So it turns out that they were having an affair.
With this startling revelation, detectives now wonder if Julian could be Dana's killer. They question where he was the night of the murder.
Julian said he was at a bar on the night that Dana was murdered. Said he was there about from 10:30 at night till past 1 a.m. Checking into the bar management seemed to indicate that that was consistent with the truth. He was with a group of friends. His friends vouched for him being there. So his alibi didn't put him anywhere near Dana's house that night.
With Julian's alibi ruling him out as Dana's killer, detectives question if their affair gave his friend Matt a motive for murder.
Dana's killer would be the kind of person who she wouldn't think twice about having in her house, but also could be the kind of person who might be jealous and could get angry enough to strangle her to death. Romantic relationships can lead to that kind of intensity of feelings. Of course, they don't all do, but a lot of times when you see that type of crime, that's the situation. The nature of this killing was very personal. And so Matt, who seemed to be kind of a primary boyfriend for Dana, naturally became a suspect.
Armed with Julian's information, investigators dig deeper into Dana and Matt's relationship.
We were told Matt was very much in love with Dana, and Dana liked Matt, but was less into Matt than Matt was into Dana.
In this case, we have one person in this relationship is clearly more invested than the other. On top of that, he discovers that she's sleeping with his best friend. That automatically interjects a degree of obvious jealousy and resentment.
Dana's phone records reveal that she spoke with Matt repeatedly the night she was killed.
According to the phone records, Dana had been on the phone with her boyfriend, Matt, talking to him a few times between 11:30 and midnight.
When detectives ask Dana's friends about Matt, they learn he's a rough type of guy.
We were being told by Dana's friends and associates and family that Matt was a biker and a person that used hard drugs, the person who could fight. He was a person we were told he could fight 10 men at once. And so we looked at him as a very good suspect. It was possible Matt found out about the affair and went and confronted Dana because he felt that he had been jilted. And during that confrontation, flew into a rage, killing Dana.
In the murder of Dana Laskowski, investigators have zeroed in on her boyfriend, Matt, who they learn is based just outside of Vancouver, Canada.
The fact that Matt lived in Canada, that alone wouldn't eliminate him as a suspect. Puyallup's only about a 3 or 4 hour drive.
So we went up to Canada to look into him. And when we arrived, we met with them, explained what we were there for, asked him where he was on the night that Dana was murdered.
When Matt is questioned, he denies having any involvement in Dana's death.
Matt said he tried to get down to Puyallup to visit Dana on the night that she died, but he was stopped at the border because he had a suspended license and was not allowed entry into the country.
So Matt told the police that at the time that Dana was murdered, he was at the Canadian border crossing and could not have been the one who had committed the murder.
We looked into it, and we could verify that he was where he said he was.
All of that was documented, not by Matt, but by the border officials. It was about as good as alibi as you could get. It was, in fact, backed up by the government.
With Matt cleared as a suspect, investigators ask him for any information that could lead to Dana's killer.
Matt said that he was on the phone with Dana on the night of the murder, and she seemed a little bit inhibited by some of her conversation. And that suggested that Dana might have had somebody in the house.
Matt suggests the mystery person could have been Dana's estranged husband, Steve.
Steve would certainly be a natural person to go talk to. And this was someone she'd shared part of her life with. But the state of being separated is a difficult state to be in emotionally. And depending on what else was going on, it could lead to that kind of anger that was necessary for this killing.
Steve might be jilted and angry enough to kill her, or they may just have had a planned meeting to exchange the children, could have erupted into a spontaneous argument, which led to the murder. All of these were possibilities that we had to look into.
Detectives dig into Steve and discover he took out a life insurance policy on Dana.
The factor of a life insurance policy would be a motive for murder for financial reasons.
When we look at early typologies of murder, one of the earliest classification, even going back to the 1920s, classified gain or a financial motive as being one of the primary motivators for homicide.
We also felt that passion, jealousy, anger at having the family split up would be a possible motive for him wanting to kill Dana.
With Dana's ex-husband in their crosshairs, detectives bring him down to the station for questioning.
As we talked to Steve about his relationship with Dana, he was found to be unusually locked up and reserved in his emotions, kind of a flat affect. He was not very expressive.
Then, detectives notice another suspicious detail.
It was noted that he had abrasions to his knees, and Dana had abrasions to her knees and elbows. We felt that the two of them might have scuffled together on the night that she was murdered. When we asked Steve about the abrasions to his knees, he said he got them playing baseball. But then one of the detectives that was there happens to be a real baseball fan, and he said it was his opinion that those abrasions were not consistent with injuries that you get playing baseball. At that point, Steve really moved up at the top of the list of suspects.
But did Steve have the opportunity to kill Dana?
When we asked Steve where he was on the night of the murder, he said he was at home 5 hours away from Puyallup. He said he put the kids in bed, went out and gassed up the vehicle, got up the next morning and drove to a local campsite.
His alibi is interesting. The fact that the triplets are conveniently out of the house for the murder, that could be a coincidence. It could also speak to planning and that the children couldn't be there for that particular day because he had plans for her.
The round trip from where Steve lived to where Dana lived is 10 hours. So we really looked at the possibility of Steve being able to put the kids in bed and drive to Puyallup, kill Dana, turn around and drive back, or have the kids in the car asleep, drive to Puyallup, kill Dana, and drive back.
If Steve did make the trip to Dana's house, investigators know he would have needed to stop for gas along the way.
We retraced the steps and the route that Steve would have taken, checked for possible places where Steve might have gassed up. We checked the surveillance cameras, any indicators along the roadway that would have picked up his car. There was no evidence to support the theory that Steve made that route.
Not finding any evidence connecting Steve to the crime, investigators rule him out as a suspect.
Now they eliminated all the suspects, and when they did that, the investigation kind of hit a brick wall. It was a source of frustration for them.
We had reached a point in the investigation where we didn't have a very good suspect, a very good plausible explanation as exactly how the homicide occurred. We were kind of at an impasse, and with the positioning of Dana, the way she was covered with the blankets afterwards, that's very unusual offender behavior. So I felt it was necessary for an FBI profile to be done on the case. So I contacted the FBI.
The local police department may not be able to say, hey, I've seen this behavior in the past. Hey, I've seen this indicator in the past for all the other homicides we had. The FBI brings that background, that experience, and that knowledge to help the police identify additional suspects.
After reviewing the case, the FBI offers up the theory that this crime wasn't planned, but happened in the heat of the moment.
They infer that this was a crime of passion, crime of rage, and very improvised. And it speaks to an offender who is more disorganized than organized and who is acting impulsively.
The FBI said that the person who came to Dana's house that night did not come to the house to kill her. And it's likely that whoever killed her was somebody who knew her, who was conversing with her, and then would have flown into a rage and attacked her.
The police looked at the estranged husband. They'd looked at the boyfriend. They'd looked at the stalker. Now the police had to figure out new suspects who weren't as obvious. Somebody did this. They just had to figure out who that was.
Armed with new information from the FBI, investigators expand their search in the brutal murder of Dana Laskowski.
So now we were looking for somebody who was prone to flying into a rage, had upper body strength, maybe somebody that Dana would have rebuffed in advance from.
Looking for new leads, detectives examine the video footage from Dana's funeral.
It was important to see who went to the funeral, but it was also important to see how people acted at the funeral.
From a psychological standpoint, you want to see A, who's in attendance, B, how they're responding. It's entirely possible that the killer is present. When you think about most people being killed by someone they know, odds are that those persons or people are going to be at the funeral because it would be socially unacceptable not to. And then how do they manage that situation? Is there something that could reveal themselves and their involvement to investigators?
As police look through the guest book, they make an unexpected discovery.
Loved ones wrote comments in there such as, they miss Dana. They can't believe she's passed away. They miss her dearly, think about her often. Then there was an entry from a niece, and she said, sorry I wasn't a better niece. I've been clean and sober 34 days now. It's all because of you. And some of the family members described the niece as unruly and wild. But the entry told us that the niece had gone clean and sober after Dana's death.
But even more importantly, she was doing it for Dana, which showed two things. One was her love for Dana, but it also showed that she felt guilt for some reason for her aunt's death. And that was important. It suggested that she may have been involved either shortly before or even during or after, somehow.
Detective Bramhall sets his sights on Dana's niece, Amanda.
I called Amanda, but I asked her to come in for an interview. And Amanda, we're talking about the death of your Aunt Dana.
Yes.
I know this is hard for you.
Amanda tells the detective that she and her aunt were close, almost like mother and daughter. She adds that Dana was always there for her and her friends.
Amanda and her friends, they call themselves the Park Rats, which we on the police department are well familiar with. They're kids that hang out at Pioneer Park. And they're kids that don't have good homes. They don't have a stable home environment. And drug use is their common bond as they're hanging out in the park.
This whole group was like right out of high school. They didn't really have plans. I think high school was behind them. They didn't know what was ahead of them. They weren't home doing their homework. They weren't helping little Lays across the street. It's a nice town, but to the extent that there was a rough group, this was that group. Dana tried to be a safe place for Amanda and her friends. Amanda could go to Dana's place, no questions asked, any time of day or night, and she could bring her friends if she needed to. That was significant when the police remembered Dana's back door was unlocked that night.
Investigators ask Amanda what she knows about her aunt's murder and quickly get a lead.
So she gave me the list of names of the people that had been in the house, and she did kind of focus on one individual, Zane. She describes Zane as somebody with a lot of upper body strength and yet a temper. Zane is somebody who dealt in marijuana.
Then, Amanda makes an even more alarming statement.
Amanda went in to describe how Zane made an advance at her, and she rebuffed him, and that he bent her over the couch and was being physical.
He tried to come on to me, and I was like, what are you doing? Get away from me. And he proceeded to act like he was, pounding me from behind and like holding my head down, and I'm like, stop. I mean, screaming, and he wouldn't stop. And then I remember, he thought it was funny, and he was laughing, and he's has a lot of strength, and he could hold me down.
This was almost consistent with the murder as we understood it. I undertake a look at Zane, and I look in our files. He's got a criminal history, dealing in drugs, violence. So he was enough in the criminal element to be a very good suspect.
Detective Bramhall reaches out to one of his younger informants to see what he knows about Zane.
I had a sit down with him, and I talked to him about the murder of Amanda's aunt. And I suggested to him that Zane would be a good likely suspect. And he looked at me and he said, Zane didn't kill Amanda's aunt. Emily killed Amanda's aunt. Everybody knows that.
One of the people in Amanda's group was a young woman named Emily. Emily is 17. She's living on the streets or close to it. She's using drugs. Amanda and Emily were very close, maybe best friends.
Detective Bramhall is familiar with Emily from her troubles with the law in her past.
I said to this person, are you telling me that Emily, this little 5'2" girl, strangled a 36-year-old mother of 3? And he said, your records are old. Emily is not a skinny little 5'2" girl. She is very muscular. She has a picture of her biceps hanging from her rearview mirror. We call her mutant because she likes to wrestle and fight with the guys.
But you can imagine the police were a little bit hesitant to believe that that was the case, really. Because again, somebody had overpowered Dana fighting for her life. Emily's not a normal suspect.
Detective Bramhall digs into the story that Emily could be Dana's killer.
As they started to interview these park rats, one of the things that started to come out was that maybe the toughest of all of them was Emily. And that Emily would win arm wrestling and even regular wrestling, and that she had this strength that other people were really surprised by, even the boys.
Detectives bring Emily down to the station for questioning.
She's wearing a very short blouse, and it exposes her waist. And I'm thinking about the position that we found Dana Laskowski in, and it would have taken torso strength. And I can see the muscles along the side of Emily's spine and the small of her back. She's very muscular. And I'm now more convinced that she could be the offender.
Detective Bramhall confronts Emily with reports of her involvement in Dana's murder.
She puts her hands on the table, she puts her head back, and her eyes go side to side. And then she comes forward very angrily and she says, those people are lying. And I said, oh, really, Emily? All those people are lying.
You're seriously driving me insane. I didn't murder Dana Laskowski or whatever. No, there's no way it was me.
There's no way?
No.
And at that point, I was very persuaded that this is the murderer.
Police drill down on Emily, asking where she was when Dana was killed.
Emily and Amanda had told us that they were at a party at the time that Dana was murdered.
I was completely high out of my brain. And I was with Amanda like the whole time.
I found out that Emily and Amanda left the party at the same time another individual left the party. The other individual drove a given distance and made a purchase, and we got that receipt, so we had the time that Emily and Amanda had left the party around midnight. It was possible they made it to Dana's house before 1 a.m.
So they have information that they're concealing. They're likely involved in the crime. So what happened here? Could Emily be the killer?
With the circumstantial evidence stacking up against Emily in the Dana Laskowski murder case, police are granted a search warrant for the room she's renting.
One of the things that they found in Emily's room was a diary or a journal. And it had some of the typical stuff you'd expect from a 17-year-old girl, but it had a couple of things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. One was the bucket list. And one of the things on the list was to kill somebody and get away with it.
Then, police uncover another crucial piece of evidence.
There was an entry where she was angry at Amanda and wrote in there that she felt like strangling Amanda the way she'd strangled her aunt.
This shocking finding confirms Emily's guilt.
Emily's diaries talk about committing the homicide, strangling Dana, wanting to possibly strangle her niece Amanda in a similar way. And in my mind, that speaks to somebody who wants to dominate people, somebody who's getting self-esteem and power from committing such offenses, or even just knowing that should she want to, she's capable of doing it.
I confronted her with the entry in the diary, and I said, look, I could strangle her, referring to Amanda, just like her aunt. She says, well, it doesn't say I could strangle her just like I strangled her aunt.
Now, Dana, we found strangled to death in her house. Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thing is, we hadn't disclosed strangulation as the cause of death. So she was booked, held for $500,000 bail, and I could begin the investigation of Emily as the offender, the murderer of Dana Laskowski.
Detective Bramhall questions Amanda again, this time confronting her about the lies she's been telling about the night of Dana's murder.
And I said, what happened? And Amanda said, I don't know, I wasn't there. Why was Amanda misleading us?
I'm curious as to why you didn't tell me when we first met.
Scared of her. I was afraid that I would get hurt too.
You said you cared so much about your Auntie Dana, but you led us on a wild goose chase. I list all the points where she has lied.
It doesn't take long before Amanda cracks under the pressure, telling detectives everything she knows.
Before we even got there, Emily had said, oh, I want some money, we need money, and I had agreed. When we walked in the living room, Dana was up and awake. And she was surprised to see us, and, you know, and was like, Amy, Dana, we need money. And she had said that she didn't have any cash on her, and, you know, I was really fine with that. But Emily, you know, come on, Dana, just anything. We really need help, you know. We knew that she had some change and some dollars in a cabinet, and Dana was getting really irritated because she were high, and I'm sure we were jittery, and Emily started getting really upset and being really rude to Dana, so Dana wanted us to leave. And she kind of, you know, put her hand on Emily to, you know, push her out, and Emily didn't like that, and she wasn't having it, and she kept pushing Dana. And I kind of, you know, walked back a little bit because I didn't want to get involved, and I was yelling at him to stop. And then all I heard was little, you know, gagging noises and gagging noises, and I saw Emily on top of her.
Then Amanda says, Emily strangled my aunt right in front of my eyes. Sorry I didn't tell you earlier.
The fact that Amanda watches Emily murder her aunt and does nothing, I think either speaks to the fact that she too was afraid of Emily, or this happened so quickly that she probably didn't even realize what she was witnessing, and that's not uncommon.
With Amanda's cooperation, investigators are now able to fill in the final 24 hours of Dana's life.
That night, Emily and Amanda had left the party around midnight. Then they made it to Dana's house before 1 a.m. They came in the back door. They were on drugs. Dana was on the couch in the living room. They went in to try to get some money. Dana said, I'm not going to give you any money. And Emily said, I want some money. And then there was a point where Dana said, enough, you girls are going to have to leave. And Dana stood up and she touched Emily, and Emily exploded. And then Emily attacked her and strangled Dana Laskowski.
Amanda watched Emily attack Dana, and Amanda yelled at her to stop, but it was too late.
It was over. The scream that the neighbor reported hearing at 1 o'clock on the night that Dana was murdered turned out not to be Dana's scream, but rather Amanda's scream.
Emily then positions Dana's body on the couch under blankets.
They grabbed a few dollars that Dana had around and got out of there.
On the way out, Emily stops and takes some of Dana's clothing.
Emily attended the funeral of Dana. She wore these clothes to the funeral. This was her display of power and dominance. I wore these clothes because I can. Look at what I did. I may describe her best as somebody who's a fledgling psychopath. She was young. Typically, you know, psychopaths are adults. It takes several years for behavior to develop. We clearly see there's a pattern here of conduct disorder, and then there's a murder.
The one unanswered question plaguing investigators is motive.
Emily told her friends, well, Amanda kept ditching me for her aunt, And Emily specifically said she was not sorry she killed Dana.
Perhaps Emily wanted to kill Dana to have Amanda all to herself. Amanda, she was reportedly close to Dana. It's entirely possible that she killed Dana as a message to Amanda. Amanda was present when this occurred. So what message is that sending to Amanda? I've done this and now I can do this to you?
Despite her role in Dana's murder, Amanda is given a plea deal and sees no prison time.
We had a lot of discussion about what we're going to do with Amanda. We certainly had her for robbery, but I felt that we needed her as a witness because she witnessed the murder. And if we charged her with a crime, she'd have the right to remain silent. So we decided that we were going to treat her as a witness.
With Amanda's testimony, Emily is charged with the murder of Dana Laskowski, but her case never goes in front of a jury.
Emily pled a Newton plea wherein she does not admit guilt. She just admits if she were to go to trial, there would be enough evidence to convict her. Emily was convicted for manslaughter in the first degree. She received a sentence of about 7 years.
After serving just 5.5 years in prison, Emily is released in 2008. She moves back to Puyallup, gets married, and has children.
The fact that Emily is out there walking around right now is concerning. These are not compulsions that just go dormant. She's already killed once. She had no regrets. She wore the victim's clothing to the funeral, much the way serial killers carry around souvenirs and trophies taken from their crimes to relive it. She should be under continued observation by police.
This case was a genuine whodunit. Most of the murders we go to, we know exactly what happened even before we get there. This one, we didn't understand going into it, but we were able to get on the right path to get this solved. And I'm glad to bring it to light. It was my job to do it, and I did my job.
This case was complicated because there was a lot of emotion and there was a lot of personal connections with everyone involved, and this was a terrible tragedy. A woman, a mother, an aunt who shouldn't have died that night. And then a 17-year-old girl who killed her, who shouldn't have killed her that night. And no matter what the justice system does, it doesn't bring Dana back.
Everybody loved Dana, and she is out of the life of her father, of her mother, and her kids are triplets. They were 8 years old at the time, and they grew up without her. So this is not justice, but in murder, nobody good wins.